All right, so we're here today with Christine Dillon. She is an author that I met online, and I put a call out for interviews, and she responded to the call, and I'm so thrilled to have her share with you about herself and about her writing and her wonderful book. She did gift me a book, and I started reading it, and I'm really enjoying it so far. So I'm going to jump right over to her and let her start and just introduce yourself, Christine, and tell us a little bit about you, your family, and where you live, and just let us get to know you a little bit.
Okay, I'm an Australian by passport, but actually I've lived most of my life in Asia. My parents were missionaries in Asia, and then I've come back as a missionary too. So I've been working 21 years in Taiwan. I work as a church planter, which basically means I tell Bible stories and introduce Jesus to people that have no interest whatsoever. So they might be in the market or small businesses. I'm a single, and yeah, I love being here. Been here 21 years.
Yeah, so that's awesome. My husband and I are church planters also, but in America. We planted a church in Virginia actually 21 years ago. So very interesting. So I know that our listeners would want to hear about your writing. So tell us how you started writing. When did you start writing? How did that come about?
I started about 2003 when someone said to me, you know, the way you do discipleship and make disciples, that should be written down. And she basically put me in a chair and put my bottom on the chair and said, start writing. And so that was my first little booklet. And since then I wrote a bit more nonfiction and had two traditionally published, one on discipleship and one on Bible storytelling, so discipleship and Bible storytelling. And I never ever thought I'd write fiction. In fact, I thought fiction was much too hard, which it is. It's very difficult to write. But I was having a sort of a prayer time about church planting, and suddenly it was like a download came into my mind of two book titles, two book ideas, and I just went, whoa, no way. And then I thought, no, you're not allowed to say no to God. So I said, Lord, if that really was you, you will have to force me to do it, and you will have to give me the ability. And so he took his time. It wasn't until 2013 that I started writing the draft of the first book.
Okay. So growing up as a child throughout school, you didn't have any inkling that you were going to be a writer someday? Because I hear so many people say, oh, I've been writing since I could hold a pencil. You know,
no, not me. I'm quite reluctant. I mean, I often joke that the nonfiction is really just laziness, because what happens is I'm a trainer, and people are constantly asking me to help them with things. And in the end, it just became easier to let's write some stuff down so that I can give it to people. And my original thought was just, you know, a PDF kind of thing, just a fairly casual thing, but God had bigger plans.
Yeah. So did God lead you to say, I want to write contemporary novels? How did you know you were going to write contemporary and not historical or some other genre?
Well, the two ideas, one was historical, which I have not written yet, and one was contemporary. And it was really interesting because I had a story and I wrote the story, and it took me about 4 years to write. And to me, it was a standalone single book. And I got towards the end of the professional editing process, and the editor said to me, Christine, I think you've got 1.5 books here. And I was really quite devastated, because we were fairly close to the end, and I basically had to chop what to me was the best part of the book. The last third, I just had to take it, just chop. But that became the end of book 2. So book 1, then book 2, the last part of it was part of the first book originally, and even 3 chapters of it made it into book 3.
Oh, gosh.
So it's become a series, which I think will be 6 books.
Yeah.
I've just written the 5th one, and it should be out next year.
That's great. So, what kind of unique challenges do you face writing about today's culture in contemporary?
Oh, yeah. You've got to get things right. And the hardest thing is technology,
Oh,
because we tend to think you've gotten used to the idea of mobile phones and email and whatever, but my books, I chose the time sort of 1995 to 1999 is probably the scope of the 4 books, which was really before email. It was before email, that most people, and even the phones, so you've got to look up. So I'm constantly looking up things like, you know, when did Nokia something or other phone come out, and I have a look at it, and you know, what kind of people were using them? Would my characters use it?
yes.
And the other thing is books that are mentioned in my books. So like, I wanted to have one of my characters look at what's the case for Christ. It was too early. I couldn't use it because it came out, I think, in like August 98 or something, September 98.
Mm-hmm.
So I just had to use the older version of that book and mention that. So you just got to be really careful that you get your details right. Even the buildings, if you're using real places,
Mm-hmm.
and what the building is called. There's a tall tower in Sydney that has had multiple names over the years. You've got to get it right.
Yeah, because your books are set in Australia.
My books are set in Australia, and I mean, I chose that time for a number of reasons. One, it fit in with the timeline of the older characters, when they were born, the influences like the Depression and the World Wars. But also, I had to choose a time because it's set in a hospital, and I used to work. The main character is what you call a physical therapist. We call a physiotherapist. Mm-hmm. And I worked as a physiotherapist up to 1997. So I was confident I could get the details right in that period of time. I was not confident that I could write a book 20 years later and get the details right.
Yes. So you mentioned the case for Christ. That kind of leads into my next question of how you incorporate Christ into your writing.
Yeah, well, that's a bit surprising too, because my great love is evangelism. So I sort of assumed if I ever wrote a book that God would have me writing for non-Christians with just sort of grace notes in them. But so far, I'm writing definite, strong Christian fiction. Probably the closest books are Francine Rivers' contemporary books, and also Robin Lee Hatch's The Forgiving Hour. I've just read that, and that's the kind of spiritual content in it. Mm. So I try and make it very natural. One of my goals was to have natural conversations about Jesus with non-Christians in my story to model evangelism. Mm-hmm. And so there's quite a bit of that, and sort of people talking about, well, doing the sort of things that Christians do or non-Christians do, and weaving that in, how people have come to Christ.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
So, I also did something else that's quite interesting, is that there's a sort of an adage in Christian fiction that you shouldn't write about miracles. And the reason they say that is that sometimes you write yourself into a corner, and then because it's Christian, they say, oh, we'll just use a miracle to get us out the corner. Well, that's not a good idea to be doing that. So what I made the decision was that every miracle in my stories had to be based on a real story. Mm. Something I have really, and I found that a really, really good way to do it. So I'm telling real story, bits and pieces of it are real, or at least related to real events.
Okay, that relates totally to my next question. Are any of your stories inspired by true events or personal history? So they are inspired by true events in some way if you're putting real people and miracles in there that you know are true.
There are lots of little things that are true. So there's a story in the 4th book about a snake, and that's a true story. There's lots of little bits and lots of, like I made the main character in the first 2 books, a physiotherapist. So in a lot of who worked in the hospital that I worked in, although I never give the hospital's name. So and some of the walks and the things, the events that happen in the book, like they go hiking or they go kayaking or whatever, those are real things that have happened to me because I'm describing real scenery. And I do that because I want it to be real. Mm-hmm. But I'm not writing real stories as such. They're still made up stories, just with elements of truth in them.
And your personal history is not a part of.
No, I'm not writing a complete personal history and putting it in a book, no. But there will be little tiny events from my life or other people's lives that are real.
Right. So you mentioned before having to look things up about the Nokia phone and things like that. Do you spend much time researching before you start writing your books, or do you find most of your research is as you go along?
No, I do it first. So I have a full-time job as a missionary, I can only do one book a year now that I've understood how to write, and it has to be very, very timetabled. So really September I spend researching, and by that I mean I'm working out the entire story. I'm getting, I use a board with different color sort of index cards, and all the chapters will end up in sort of 4 lots of 10. So there's a total of 40 chapters. And that will show me what needs to be researched. And it might be as simple as, what kind of car does the character drive that suits their lifestyle, their personality, and their status or their job. And I've got to check that that's a real car and whatever.
Right.
So it's lots of funny things. I mean, I've researched carpentry, I've got quilting in one. I mean, I had to learn all the vocabulary. The one I'm writing now has got squash playing. So I have to, watch videos about squash or volleyball and get the terminology right.
Right. So you're learning lots of new things as you go along.
I enjoy that bit. I really enjoy the research and the planning.
So how many days a week do you write, and how many hours in a day? Do you have like a set schedule?
So what I do is I have one writing day a week on a Saturday, and I try and write, say, from 9 till 3. But when I'm writing a novel, this last one I've really got disciplined, and I sort of set myself, okay, I want to write 500 words a day, not on the writing day, for 5 days a week. So that gives you an extra 2,500 words a week. Mm-hmm. And you can write 500 words. If you know what you want to write, you can easily write it in 40 minutes. So I'll just sit down and just pump those words out in a sort of a sprint. And that works well for me.
Yeah. Now, after you write your first draft, do you edit as you go, or do you just put the draft out on the page and then go back through and edit after you do your first draft?
I do a read through of the previous day's writing as I'm writing, ready for the writing day. But it's not major edits. It's just to get me into the swing of it. And another thing I've learned is not to finish a chapter. When I reach the end of my time or my word count, I stop immediately. Because if I finish the chapter, then sometimes it's hard for me to get the momentum going again. I'm much better just to already be in the swing and actually stop when I'm in a mood, and then next time is easier to start.
Yeah. So you said
I'm learning. You learn what suits your personality. So it's getting easier and easier. Right. And then I let it sit for 6 weeks, and then I'm doing a major edit now before I send it to a couple of people to read it and comment on it.
So you said you didn't grow up thinking you're going to be a writer. As a child, what did you want to be when you grew up? What did you think you were going to do?
I wanted to be a teacher, sort of 10 and 11-year-olds. That's what I wanted to do. And I wanted to go back to the school that I went to in the mountains of Malaysia. That was my goal.
Well, you are teaching, maybe not in the way you thought, but you are teaching. And even through your books, you're teaching about Christ, even in fiction. And that's one thing I love about fiction, is how we can tell the truth of God's word in a non-threatening way that people might not listen to in a sermon or a nonfiction book. So what's coming next from you? What can we look for?
I'm working on the fifth novel in the series, and mine are a series that you really should read from the first one. The first four are all about one family, the MacDonald family, and different parts of that family. And then the fifth and the sixth are people that were impacted by their lives, so that they're link stories. After I've done the sixth, so that should be the July, the year after next, then I might need a rest by then, but I'd really like to write some biblical fiction, because I'm a Bible storyteller, and so that's what I'm thinking and doing all day.
Right.
And it really makes you think deeply about the scriptures. So I'd really like to write some biblical fiction.
Yeah, that sounds good. So besides commenting on your website, following you there, how can readers and fans support you moving forward?
Three places that are very easy to support. One is reading books and reviewing. There's just, especially if you're independently published, you need hundreds and hundreds of reviews. There's never too many. And the great thing about reviews is you can write one review, just a few lines, not telling us the summary of the book, but just why you like the book. And then copy and paste that same review to multiple sites. So, Amazon, Goodreads, Apple, Google, there's all sorts of places.
Yes.
Subscribing to an author's newsletter, particularly newer authors really need that encouragement. So my subscribers, I share prayer points. I also have a group on Facebook that really supports me. They vote on covers, titles, they pray for me. They're praying for us right now. They're much more involved. So there are different levels of involvement. The furthest distance is sort of being a BookBub follower, where you get alerts for an author's books. And then subscriber is closer. And then this Facebook Storyteller Christine is the name I always go under for the website, storytellerchristine.com, and then Storyteller Christine for the Facebook group as well. So depending on your level of interest.
Right. So on this post below this video, I'm going to be putting links to your website and your Facebook and your platform, so that people can connect with you and follow you there. And just wanted to also let everyone know that Christine has graciously offered to donate an ebook to a winner as a giveaway. So if you'll just comment on this original post, on this video blog post, then you'll go into a drawing. You'll have a week to post, and then Christine will send the winner an ebook, and you can live anywhere.
Yeah, I'll check with the winner which one they want. I mean, they don't have to have, the one that we think they ought to. They might have read some already.
Okay, that sounds good. So anything else you want to leave us with before we close this out?
Well, you love stories of hope. And so these novels really are designed to bring us closer to Jesus and to think seriously through issues like why, what if we're disappointed with God? Why does God allow suffering? Forgiveness, lots of other issues come up. So they're stories of hope, and we need lots of hope at the moment, I think.
Amen to that. We definitely need hope. And I think it's just awesome how God led me to that theme of hope in 2019, the fall of 2019, right before 2020 hit, because it's definitely been a year where we've needed hope. And I think we'll always need hope, right? But yeah, people are looking for that. I just thank you so much for your willingness to join me and to kind of be my guinea pig on my first video.
Pleasure. I'm always happy to be a guinea pig.
Well, thank you. And I look forward to having this post on my blog, and hopefully it'll just go across lots of platforms and people be encouraged and start following you in your writing journey. So thank you, Christine.
Blessings.
Blessings to you.